Okay, so as I told you, in this lecture, Fumio Obata, he will give the lecture titled An Insight into the Mechanism of the Roles of Antiheroes in Manga and Anime under the context of Japanese society. Before the lecture starts, let me tell you about the schedule of the webinar briefly today. So first of all, as you see this, my colleague, Chris Hood, will give you an opening message. Then a lecture by Fumio will start. And then after the lecture, we will review the questions. And then we are planning to close this webinar at 1 o'clock. And while the lecture, all your microphones are muted. And this webinar is being recorded, as you know. And recorded session video will be in Cardiff University School of Modern Languages YouTube channel. I'll be putting a link to the YouTube channel in the chat box later on for you. And then while the lecture, please type any question that you have in the Q&A box, not in the chat box, as we review them after the lecture. And also please do not use raise hand function while that lecture. Please do not use raise hand function while the lecture. So, okay, Chris, I'll pass this virtual microphone to you.
Thank you very much, Mayu, and welcome everybody. I think one of the great things that have come out of the last 12 months is it is possible to bring together people much more easily than we saw in the past for seminars and webinars. We had a regular seminar series before at Cardiff and used to get 30, 40 people come to these, most of whom, of course, were based in Cardiff or thereabouts. Whereas today I can see we already have 77 people on this call, and of course many others will probably watch the video later on YouTube. So this is a great thing that has come out of this. It's great for our own Cardiff students to get exposure to learning more about Japan alongside their Japanese language skills. The two things very much need to work in parallel, and I'd very much like to thank my colleague Mayu for helping to set up this series, and also thank the Japan Foundation London office for their support of it. And I will now hand back to Mayu to give a short introduction about today's speaker. So please enjoy today's webinar, everybody.
Thank you very much, Chris. So, okay, now let me introduce Fumio briefly from me. Fumio is a graphic novelist and a senior lecturer of illustration at University of Gloucester. And his work focuses on cultural differences and social issues. And his latest graphic novels, I'll show you the photograph of his publication. Okay. His latest graphic novels are Just So Happened and The Garden, written by a Japan-based Scottish author, Sean Michael Wilson. And I have two of those publications that they are totally amazing, and I really love them. And so, okay, so Fumio, I would be grateful if you could share your slide. I'll stop sharing mine. So, and then if you could start your lecture for us, that would be great. Hold on a sec, I'll stop sharing. Here you go, Fumio.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm going to share my screen now with you. Okay, I hope everybody can see this. Right, yes, hello everybody. Welcome to my lecture on this exploration of anti-heroes in Japanese storytelling. We call it manga and anime today. And yes, my name is Fumio Obata, and as Mayu kindly introduced me to you guys, I make comic books and graphic novels outside Japan, so I have a different perspective on things. And yes, today's theme is looking into their roles and sort of mechanism behind it, behind the roles of anti-heroes in that context, and something I've been very interested in for some time, and because I believe the manga and anime reflect the current issues in Japanese society. Yeah, this is first slide. This first slide you are looking at is actually this is the about the same person, same character, which looks very strange. So many, centuries between those two. But obviously, the one on the right-hand side is the old version, and it's about, well, this is a real-life character called Taira Masakado, and he revolted against the emperor in 10th century, and he was a feudal lord of samurai crown, and he, of course, he proclaimed that he's another emperor, but he got executed in the end. And but thing is, he became a legend because because of that kind of, he established the anti-hero status, and later became adapted into the popular culture. And even today, he's well known as a kind of rebel character. And here we go. This is the 21st century interpretation of the Taira Masakado. And this is something that it touches, well, it represents what I'm trying to talk about today. So that's the start. The next slide. Oh, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, the start is really what is, who are the rebels and the anti-heroes, why we get so attracted to them, and this is universal really. It's not just the case in Japan. And what you see is the first character we see is Katniss from the Hunger Games, played by the Jennifer Lawrence, and next one is Don Corleone from The Godfather, played by De Niro, and the Che Guevara. These people, well, the thing is, they're representing the what we know as rebels, or people who kind of underdogs in the society, going against the authority and try to change things. And the rebels are basically advocates for change, and they're representative of the people's desire to overturn the norms and then to free from the reign. And they're underdogs, but they get that kind of how do you call it? People sympathize with them, and these are the things that we always come across in different times and decades, all the time. The point is that important thing is we have these anti-heroes, or let's say people who revolt against or authorities or norms. These people are always about in history. And we see these things in art quite a lot, and I encourage people to really read history with art. And what we're seeing is 3 images from a very notable Western artist, and the top left is the Rex, it's by William Hogarth. He did a very famous series of paintings called Rake's Progress, depicting the youth of that time. Who basically fell from the grace, but sort of representing what the real life were like at the time. And then the painting that we see next is the Olympia by the Edward, Manet, isn't it? Yeah, Manet. So it's the painting of a prostitute and her servants, black servants, and it was shocker at the time, but it was the reality. And the last one is the poster by Only Lautrec, and it is the poster about the Moulin Rouge, and Moulin Rouge, the very famous Parisian dance hall, which was a very popular entertainment place. And he was painted, but created lots of posters advertising these things. What I'm trying to say is there's a dominance of bourgeoisies, right? So they are not the aristocrats or the part of the authority, also part of the authority, but they became really powerful. So they became the patrons of the new art, and because they're coming from the normal classes or middle class or lower class. So, they were basically supporting the new types of art which were on demand by the mass. So this is basically a good example of art mirroring the society and people at the time. And outsiders were given a spotlight. Right. So art reflects the sort of the what was going on at the time. And what we're seeing here is now this is called the Chojugiga, and that's what they call the oldest manga in Japan from 12th and 13th century. They actually, sort of call it like, oh, let's just look how old manga is, etc. But the point is, it's really important to look at the historical background, okay, than these things. So in Japan, right, between the 12th and 13th centuries, in Japan was really a time of turbulence and change. So the first samurai government was going to be established, cancelling the rules of the aristocrats back then, which lasted about 4 centuries. So it was a time that the old norms was turned upside down. So the people basically, this is not really done by one person. I think we just don't know if we did it actually. This is the copy. But what I mean is it's actually reflecting the time at that time, the kind of authority figures, and they're using animals to mock ourselves, and also the figures of authority, which you can see in the second image. And this is really important because it is actually a visual euphemism, to hint at absurdity. So they are not really directly attacking the authority. And that's what art is excellent about, Right, so this is Kabuki. You probably know this very well. And the beginning of the Kabuki is really interesting because at that time, it's between 16th and 17th century. So Japan was just about to move out of the war state period. So the Tokugawa crown, which would be ruling Japan in the modern times, really establishing the hard control over the society. There are guys who just behaved against all these things, and they're called kabuki mono. Kabuki means it's actually a sort of leaning towards strangeness, leaning towards the outrageous or flamboyance. So there are guys who are like thugs and misfits and punks, dressed in a very peculiar way, and they sometimes form the gang and raided areas and stuff like that. They weren't samurai. They were servants of samurai, but the point is at the time there's no strict class system around. So there's a lot of crossovers going on between the classes, but they were generally given the name kabukimono. And if you can see these two small images on the top left, the second image is actually a woman performer, female performer called Izumo Okuni. She was a dancer and performer at that time and adopted the look of kabukimono, and she established a dance form called kabuki odori and dance of kabuki, and that is the foundation of kabuki as we know today. So name remained, right? Kabukimono remained as kabuki, but of course it was very much welcomed by the mass, the people. So he became the champion of all arts during the Edo period that was controlled by the Tokugawa crown. And Edo culture was fostered by the city dwellers in Edo and Kyoto, Osaka. The point is, because it was started off with kabukimono, so it was a kind of against authority. So at that time, okay, going to see kabuki, it actually wasn't really encouraged because it's actually a sign of going against authority. So the kabuki places doing the kabuki and also other comedies and stuff like that, they were called akusho, which is a place of depravity or devious. So akusho is actually a very negative term because under the eye of authority, they want very kind, or it's basically potentially they plotting to overturn their authority and power. Okay, but it was basically what people actually wanted to see as to release their stress and stuff like that. So it was basically okay-ish in a way. So it was put into the gray area. But kabuki, name of kabuki remains still there. But I just want you to look at the photograph of that place with the neons and all stuff. It's Kabukicho, which is in the Shinjuku in Tokyo. It's a Soho. And name of kabuki remains like this. This is the Soho area. That's what it's supposed to be, like a bad place. You go and seek some pleasure. Okay, but the actual kabuki theater is in Ginza district, which is the equivalent of the Oxford Street. So the name is still there because it was adapted to the Soho of Tokyo. So that's really interesting. The kabuki theater hosted the plays by those famous guys in the history that went against the rules of authority. And the famous one is Chushingura, 47 Ronin. And they were samurais, but they just went against the rules of the authority and did their duty as a samurai. I don't go into the details of it because it's just running out of time already. Next one is Nezumi Kozo, and is a famous thief who just stole the money to give it to the poor. So it's like a Robin Hood figure. And the third one is Shika Goemon, and he's a famous thief as well, who just tricked the authority, managed to escape from being caught many times. These anti-heroes were the popular mass, and kabuki theater staged their stories so many times. And the other thing is I just want to say that in Japan still, when they announce the next titles on the kabuki theater, they call it kyogen. And kyogen means insane and idiotic words and matters and stuff like that. So, it's just basically, it's just, under the eye of authority, they're just trying to just say that, yes, we are doing something really stupid, so please don't take it too seriously, etc. So that tradition is still there. Kyogen is, that's what we call the kabuki titles even today. And so the modern day arrived and silent movie came in, and all these anti-heroes figures, they came onto the silver screen at the time. But the point is that we went into the war periods. So the powerful totalitarian state emerged, and all these comedies and all these things, they need to be adapted into it. So there are animations made for the propaganda. So really interesting time, because there's no chance that these gray zones, those arts, couldn't be escaped from the powerful state, right? And they just went along with the authority. So it was a very depressing time, frustrating time for the artist. So after the war, of course, there's eruption of all this frustration. They just start exploring all these things. So the birth of new icons, basically, and the post-war youth culture. So James Dean and Marlon Brando were appeared, of course, representing youth culture at the time. But the same thing was happening in Japan as well. So there's anti-heroes emerged. And started actors became new youth. And these are the posters of that films at the time. That is sort of merged in with these samurai movies and also the Japanese gangster movies, okay? And like the westerns are kind of samurai movies, are equivalents of the Western movies, and gangster movies, of course, it's in the West as well. And even after the war, okay, these things never fade away. There remains romanticism towards outlaws and outsiders. It's the same thing as I explained in the beginning, that we have this affection towards the anti-heroes or outlaws, basically. So after the war, these things became really like, let's just do that kind of thing. And then there's a genre film called Ninkyo movies. They just became so popular during the 60s and 70s. And again, it's called Ninkyo, it's about, gangsters or mafia in Japan, which is a kind of taboo thing. So we call them Ninkyo. Ninkyo means trust and brotherhood type of thing. So just saying that the kind of positive aspect of it, which is apparently passed on from the samurai. But in any case, the boom was quite significant and created another icon called Ken Takakura. And he only died recently, but he was very respected among the Japanese public. And he was such an icon. And the boom of that Ninkyo movie is perhaps the people were missing the bygone era when the Western system economy taking over everything. So maybe it's a bit of escapism, or somewhere they would like to just have rest from all this. Right. So finally, there's a manga. The thing is, I just have to introduce. Just to say, the readership of manga is very clearly grouped up and categorized. So we have mangas for the infants, and mangas for the boys, and mangas for the girls, and mangas for adults, and mangas for female. But what happened during the 60s and 70s was that the borderline between the comic books, manga for kids, got really blurred. So what happened was these Ninkyo movies that we saw earlier, that got introduced into the implemented into the hero figures of the shonen manga, which is boys manga. Which is basically aimed at teenagers. So the Ninkyo movie or Ninkyo themes are basically for the adults, but because of the blurring effects on the borderline between the kids and the boys magazine, sorry, not kids, boys. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. What I mean is boys and young adults. Sorry, this is what I mean, the borderline. I got it wrong, sorry. So yeah, it's a borderline between shonen manga, which is a boys manga, and seinen manga, which is adult manga, became very rare. So the Ninkyo, which was aimed at seinen, which is the men, adults, introduced to the boys manga. And that's what happened, that something like, what you're seeing, these photographs of men, they were students from the pre-war era. And there was a certain type of fashion called bankara, which is quite similar to kavukimono. They were trying to be a little bit outside the mainstream, trying to be a little bit more rebellious, sorry. Ban means being being a little bit outrageous. Okay, and so that kind of fashion was still there at schools, right? And that matched up with Ninkyo, and that got introduced to the comics for the boys. So during the early 70s, I would say, so sort of the template was established for the hero figures of the boys manga. And the Shonen Jump is, it's famous for running a series such as Dragon Ball, really pushed that hero figures, right? Sorry, that really became a template of like hero figures, okay, for the boys, and that still resonates even today because of probably how influential the Shonen Jump has been. So I just want to focus on the shonen manga, which is the boys manga, really, to talk about the anti-heroes. Okay, and within that, we can just make into we can divide them into 3 categories of that boys manga. And in those, rebels or anti-hero characters play huge roles, along with the hero and heroine. And sometimes the rebels themselves become the main characters. Okay. Anyway, the 3 categories are sports and values, juvenile delinquent, and fantasy and action. So these are 3 categories which are like still popular even today in those boys manga. So there are 3 categories. So I just go through famous titles of these ones. Sports. What you're seeing is the Stars of the Giants, which is a really, really popular influential comic series in the 60s. This is the animation version of it. And yeah, if you see the what kind of things going on there, it's the domestic violence going on, which is, of course, it's not really acceptable today. But back then, it was something that, you know, the boys had to put up with in order to achieve their social status. They are underdogs basically in society. So they are from the poverty, they're from the poor families, but they just make their way up in sports. So with guts and spirits, you make your way up. It's called Spokon. And the Start of the Giants, it's just a very, you know, it's just the typical title of that. It's called Kyojin no Hoshi, by the way, in Japanese. And next one is Tiger Mask. Okay, this is again the same kind of idea of main character from a poor family background. In this case, it's orphanage. He makes his way up in the wrestling, professional wrestling, but he has to hide his identity because he's a villain character in wrestling world. But in fact, he donates most of his fight money to the orphanage because he was an orphan as well. So he's kind of hidden hero. You know, he doesn't really reveal the righteousness he's doing to the society. Interesting thing is this character is very much well remembered by the generation, by the people who really enjoy that series. And the poverty issue is actually quite has been quite an issue in Japan right now, and so there are kids who cannot really get the basic accessories, notes, and kind of stuff, you know, notes and stationaries for their studies. Okay, so there are people who, but there are kind of anonymous people donating those basic studying accessories for the kids all over Japan. So that's why you're seeing that there's a map of Japan, and you see that the yellow masks, you know, appear in all those places, donating this money and notebooks and pencils and stuff like that. And they all call themselves Tiger Mask. And of course, it's a fictional character, but in real life, there are people who are just doing this anonymously, which is really interesting. And this is Tomorrow's Joe. It's a boxing, very, very famous boxing manga. And again, the main character is he's orphan, and he makes his way up in sports, right? And he becomes an important figure in society. What I would like to point out is the photograph that you're seeing. It's so Tomorrow's Joe, the main character, he's got a rival. He dies tragically on the ring, and the fans of that series organized a funeral for that character, which is incredible. And this is actually the turning point that the public acknowledged that people were becoming really serious about manga, and created a kind of a social phenomenon, really. This series, and the Tomorrow's Joe really influenced a lot of things, especially the youth of that time. And yeah, what you're saying is it's called hijack. Airplane hijack incident happened on March on 1970. There's a group of radical communists, the radical communist sympathizers, university students. They hijacked the plane and demanded going to North Korea, which is it's a shocker because it's the first incident happened. And those guys are still, well, on the hunt in international scale. And I think there are about still 5 of them in North Korea. What's interesting is that, well, first of all, yes, the people surprised the university students who are reading manga, such as Tomorrow's Joe, very seriously. And the Japanese public was very surprised. And these guys were reading Tomorrow's Joe because as they were leaving Japan with the plane, they just made a statement saying that, sorry, I don't think there's an English translation for that, but they said something like, despite all sorts of obstacles and challenges in front of us, okay, we feel even more defiant and confident that's coming from inside. To conclude, let's be clear, we are Tomorrow's Joe. And they said that in their political statement. That is a shocker. And this is just a comic book, okay? But people really sympathizing with those characters. And I'm talking about 1960s and 70s. Okay, so that's the kind of development. And now we're going into the 90s. And the sports manga developed into, started merging into the bad youth category. So the kids who were basically, how do you call it? Those bad boys. They again overturn the people around them about their value to the sports, and this is the most popular sports title about basketball called Slam Dunk. And it was a huge hit in the 90s. And the main character was bad youth, but he basically finds himself in basketball, high school basketball. And they are making a feature film, I think this year. I don't know when it's going to be released, but this is such a popular series, still really influencing the kids right now, or new generation of readers. Right, so bad youth category, delinquent, juvenile delinquents. And as you can see, there are 2 which are kind of very old ones. But what you can see in small families are like today's interpretation, today's sort of artworks of it. You can see that kind of a big jump in between the styles of it. What I'm saying is that the category of bad youth is still very popular, and the kids love that. And these are 2 titles from 90s, well, it's in fact from 80s. Lokudenesh Bruce, which is, again, it's a typical boys manga about the youth. And of course, the adapted to on stage theater and films even today. And it's interesting that the real life characters and actors emulating manga characters' behavior. And the other one is that from Today I Am. Again, it's just this is a bit more comedy touch, with the comedy touch over it. It's the same thing again, like those bad kids, sort of fighting against the society around them, but they're actually they're very heartful people, kind people, like a Nikkyo movie. And again, that is adapted to a TV drama. And it's quite recent now, although these two titles started in the 80s and already finished, but still going. And this is the latest bad youth manga, which is probably the most popular one, called Tokyo Avengers. And it's really funky. The designs are absolutely like adapting today's sort of youth culture very well. But interestingly, they're referring to the bike gangs. That's like something that almost like a tradition in the Japanese bad youth culture. So the kids get together and then run bikes, motorcycles, and and make some noises. And they've got the particular fashion, as you can see in those illustrations. This illustration. And they just do all those silly hairstyles and all that stuff. That is like a template now. And the Tokyo Avengers, even though we're talking about 2020, referring to these things. And it's something that established among the youth, despite the generations. So they're making an animation series now, starting in this April. And the last category is the fantasy in action. And this really overstretched out of Japan, I guess, because it's a fantasy in action, so it can be seen like it can be adapted by kids in different countries, I suppose. So Dragon Ball is clearly very, very popular, of course, well known. And Naruto, about the ninja, and the One Piece over there, down there. Important thing is, I think particularly these heroes from these fantasy and action titles, they are very typical of the heroes I want to talk about. They are 100% positive. They are very they don't have any hint of darkness in them. And that's why they are heroes. But they also have anti-heroes in the stories who are a bit hard, they're a bit lonely. And they just meet and they fight, etc. Of course, anti-heroes and rebel characters sort of change under the shadow of this 100% positive hero figures. And this is something that particularly, I think, resonates. I think it's actually overlaps what's happening in Japanese society, or let's say that what public would like to see. Yesterday's enemy is today's friend. So there's in those stories of those titles, there is a kind of a system in which that anti-heroes and rebel characters goes under the wing of the hero. And this is really obvious, actually, compared to something like we saw probably 20 or 30 years ago, like what I said about Tomorrow's Joe, which was for the boys magazine, but there's no hint of dark thing in it. And those heroes of, let's say, after the 21st century, like Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto. So the manga heroes today is a symbol of inclusion, inclusiveness, and kind of healing as well. And youth are very much feel very lonely nowadays. I think a lot of people are seeking some healing, and because manga is people's art, reflects society at that time. So hero figures does reflect that kind of inclusiveness towards those people who are a little bit hard. So they need to be under the wing of somebody who is really strong and 100% positive. And so there are, in those stories, there are anti-heroes and sort of rebel characters, which you can see in a small thumbnails on the bottom hand side of the, right hand side of the bottom. These rebel characters, they were enemies, or they probably doesn't want to join the group. They eventually go under the wing of the heroes. And this is very, this is something that I cannot help noticing. And the illustration you're seeing is from Kimetsu no Yaiba, which is, it's called the Demon Slayer. It's the most successful animation series and manga series in the last 20 years, I think, or maybe 30 years. It's a big, massive hit. And this series, of course, all these titles are series. They were series for the Shonen Jump. The most popular and Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Demon Slayer, of course, is a series from Shonen Jump again. So this this manga or anime inherits all these things that, those Naruto and One Piece and Dragon Ball. So there's a notion of inclusiveness and healing and heroes, and lots of anti-heroes in there. They were a little bit they don't really go along with the main character's idea, sort of behavior and etc. Among the fights against the demons, but they eventually go under the wing of the main hero. Even the bad guys, like demons, they were hurt as well. They got traumatized as well. They were traumatized and suffering from it, and they got healed by the 100% positive attitude by the hero. And I think there's a appeal to the reader as well. They are seeking that kind of the same sort of inclusiveness, at least happening in fantasy. So 2D characters, in Japan, like Avatar type of characters, they appeal so much if they were real charisma. So what kind of longing in there and the idea of fandom? I think cosplay is a form of, it is, cosplay is a self-expression, okay? But the thing is that those fans probably see themselves in those characters as well. It means that they are dissatisfied with the real lives, maybe. I think there's aspects of it that really interests me. So yesterday's enemy is tomorrow's friends. So they are no enemies or allies under the idea of rinne, which is of course coming from the Buddhism. So under the great ring of the reincarnation, okay, there's no really real bad people, only the common suffering to all. And this is actually, yes, still in the at the base of our ideas. Okay, but the thing is, to put that idea well, it's a tolerant. It's people become very tolerant to each other. But to put it badly, it's ambiguous. So it creates a lot of gray zones. So ambiguity creates gray zones. And if there are holes, people just don't really go and try to fix it within the system. And that actually contributes to the long-term conservatism going on in Japanese politics as well, I think. There's kind of lots of deficiencies and malfunctions going on in a lot of things, within our system, but we just do not really go about and try to fix these things. I think there's a lot of gray areas and gray zones. I think it's to do with the idea of rinne. Maybe I'm just exaggerating, but it does contribute to the idea of creating the gray zones. And that reflects onto this idea of the bad guys eventually get sucked into the 100% hero figure. And they are traumatized as well, so they are not 100% evil. Okay, so just coming to the end point. So the real life levels is something quite important because, so in West, okay, rebels in life who challenge all the rules and authority. So there are rebels who really went against the norms of the society and actually changed the world for better or worse, but mostly better. The people we are looking at here is the eminent Pankhurst, of course, organized the first UK suffragette movement. And Greta Thunberg, of course, the very, very notable figure right now, and Gandhi, John Lennon, Steve Jobs, Luther King. And sorry, I put Trump in it, but President Trump in it. But I think he's really popular, supported by lots of people. So you could say that he's actually challenging old norms and trying to do something, well, not trying to do something, but in any case, he's challenging it. And quite a lot of them actually changed our ideas of society. And the music and sports are usually platform for the social minorities and underdogs to really point out their importance. So they become icons through their talents and charisma. Diego Maradona, of course, he's actually a mixed race in Argentina, and Paul Gascoigne. Lady Gaga, obviously, she's very, very, very outspoken, and Bob Marley, and the Megan Rapinoe, very, very important spokesperson, person for LGBTQ in sports. These people have challenged or challenging even today. They're about something wrong with the society, or for the society to be more progressive and inclusive. So how about Japan? Okay. Just really looking at the baseball is obviously the most popular sport in Japan. So we are seeing those three head figures of the sports, who's very respected, but they are not necessarily level like Diego Maradona, or outspoken like Megan Rapinoe. And the smallest that we're seeing here is Asa Shoryu. He's actually from Mongol. And he created some scandals with the mafia, so he got outcasted from the sumo world. He's back in Mongol now, but he was even during his sumo career, he created some. Well, he behaved very differently from the others. He didn't behave according to the code of conduct that were expected by the sumo wrestlers, especially the champions, but he didn't seem to care, and he eventually became outcast from it, and he quitted sumo. And yes, we do have foreigners or mixed race people who are making some differences now. And the tennis player we're seeing is Naomi Osaka, and she's half Haitian and half Japanese. And I'm glad to see she's now coming to the center point of these things, and she's very outspoken. And this is the last slide. Yeah, it's about 2 years ago. The Nissin is a famous noodle maker, makes cup noodle, and Nissin is a sponsor for Osaka, and they made anime adverts, just joining the bandwagon, right? Because it's cool, Japanese anime, etc. But they represented the Osaka in that kind of way, so they just gave her a paler skin, and that created the uproar. Sort of, that's not, correct. It's basically, yes, they stuck to the old concept. There isn't really anime character with a darker skin tone, or they thought wouldn't appeal better. They stuck to the old concept, and it's actually new icon versus old concept. And they withdrew the adverts now. The point is, this is a really good example of what Japan thinking in terms of the world standard and all this progressiveness currently going on. And Osaka, in last year's US Open, in which she won, she wore the masks, which has got the name of the victim of the police abuse, the black people who died from the police abuse. She imprinted the names of those people in her black masks in all of her 7 matches during the US Open, which is really important. Okay, of course, a lot of people really thought and received the message very well, but it wasn't very much not received. But people didn't really pay much attention to a spotlight about the Black Lives Matter movement and how she participated in that. in Japan. But the thing is, she is a new icon, and I'm glad to see that she's very outspoken about these things. But the media or the sponsors around her weren't really going along with it, or not really engaging with it. But the point I'm making is that she may be, yes, well, she's not rebel, but she's making her way up through her talent in the world of sports. And she's trying to influence the society through this, okay? Which are probably something that we should be trying to do as well in the real life. But whereas in the manga and anime, there are lots of like anti-hero figures and rebels, okay? And interestingly, they were inspired by the real rebels in real life's history, okay? As we see in the first slide, Tairano Masakado, okay? But in real life, we try not to, or we don't really try to overturn things, you know, or to question things. And sometimes we just, and occasionally we need to make that kind of hiccups like this, what we see in that slide with Osaka. Of course, it's not really that, how do you call it? You know, maybe it's not really that kind of major issue that, you know, abuse anyone, okay, or insults people. But it's a bit of frustration that I find that despite that how influential manga anime is now worldwide, we just don't really like, I don't know, we just lack a bit of awareness of it. And the mechanism that we see in the manga and anime is very much about reflecting the mass and people. And in 60s and 70s, people proactive about things. Sort of influenced by these avatars in fiction. But today is really, I think it's really about inclusiveness. People are more fragmented, I think. But instead of seeking that refuge in the fantasy world, why don't we do it in that kind of real life, like the Black Lives Matter movements, and just, you know, learn something from Naomi Osaka? But we don't do it. I suppose Japan isn't having that problem like what we see in the West right now. But in certain points, I think will in the future, I think gradually will change because we are getting mixed race and different backgrounds, and they are more outspoken. I think that's probably it. I hope I make sense, or I have made sense. Is that okay?
Thank you very much, Fumio.
So I just...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There are so many representations of the anti-heroes in anime and manga in Japanese society, and that was very, very interesting for me. And there are some questions here from Dan. Can you see the Q&A page, Fumio? Can you see that?
Yes, I can see, yeah.
Shall we review the Dan's question? With respect to yesterday's enemy is today's friend, do you find a sympathy from heroes towards the anti-hero or rebel to reflect any kind of acceptance of real-world rebels in Japanese society?
Right, yeah, this is good. I mean, I was going to mention this. In the real world in Japan, the thing is, we still have, you know, okay, all right, yes, we have serious crimes, of course. But judicial system in Japan, I think we find it a little bit unfair. But the point is that we do still have the capital punishment. We still have that going on. So it is actually, in terms of, you know, like being tolerant and kindness and lenient towards the people who committed the crime. When it comes to the capital punishment, it's something that we are still sticking with. This is something that I don't know if I can explain it very well, but I think capital punishment is traditionally in Japan is really to execute somebody who went against the authority and the power. Okay, and so it's not really coming from a deep discussion about the human rights. I think this is how we perceived at the beginning the capital punishment was meant to be for the society, right? So it's politically motivated in a way that, you know, the power is trying to regulate the revolutionaries, and the capital punishment is still there. Probably the same reason goes to China as well. They keep the capital punishment because of that, showing the power of the authority. So it's kind of a separated thing. Hope I answered okay.
Okay, so Dan, I hope the answers okay for Dan. Okay, so another question here. Can I move on to another question that was from Sam at the 151? Okay, Sam says there seems to be a crossover from anime and manga to martial arts. Recent rise kickboxing competition. So main star Nasukawa with a Dragon Ball hairstyle.
Ah, wow, excellent! I didn't know that. I suppose it's Nasukawa, I suppose, trying to probably, I don't know, maybe there are some personal reasons, but how I see it is like trying to get more, try to be courageous and try to feel more powerful, like the Dragon Ball characters, probably. So it's kind of yeah, it's crossover between the fantasy and the real life, and the people in the real life sympathize or try to possess the powerfulness from the characters they love. And of course, they are saying that probably, you know, he's saying that he's a fan of Dragon Ball, and it's nice kind of a self-expression, I think. Yeah. So, but it's the elements of it, you know, trying to possess the what that character signifies in the manga. Hope it's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Obata-san. I shall move on to the next question that was at the 155 from Louisa. Louisa said, in regards to Osaka and increased amount of foreigners in Japan, why do we not see an increased amount of diversity in anime or mangas?
Okay, manga and anime are basically entertainment, okay? So it needs to create money, and they are very aware of the reactions from the viewers. So if the viewers are homogenic, if it's less diverse, they don't really do it. So, but of course, if you see more, well, they're basically fans who are mixed race, and they will respond to that. But you know, there's no like political like how do you call it? You know, in here, right? But there's the idea of the harmony between the different races and the cultures. You need to create it. You need to make efforts to do the culture. Okay, so you do that, right? So the media talk about it and try to show that what society is really about. And in Japanese art sectors in Japan do not have that kind of political, how do you call it? What is that word for it? Yeah, they just don't really see it that way. So, you know, when they know that there are fans outside Japan and different people with the racial backgrounds love manga and anime, but they are principally focusing on the Japanese public, okay, because they buy the things, okay, so that's why that's not really so active, because they are not really having that they don't have any obligation, political obligation, or let's say moral obligation to do so, okay, but it will happen because the readership will be ever so mixed racially, okay, and culturally, so we will reflect that sooner or later. I think in 10 years it will change a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Obata-san. And then there are more questions, but it's 2 o'clock. And then if you could extend your, if you could be here for a while, that would be great. So can I continue the reviewing these questions? I guess that's one question from Abdullah. Do you believe there is a difference in perception of redeemability of antiheroes in Japan versus the West? I feel in the West, antiheroes are seen as less redeeming, and people enjoy the darkness of antiheroes in and of itself.
Less redeeming in the West. I think you're right. Yeah, I think in manga, okay, in manga and anime and fantasy, okay, the bad characters, or let's say the last boss, what we say in Japan, you know, in the manga and anime, like really bad real guys, like Emperor of the Dark Side, they even they have the trauma. Even they weren't bad in the beginning, and of course I don't know, they get defeated in the end, but they don't really go to hell, or they get some, how do you call it? I think it's Dragon Ball as well. The very last character, the Majin Buu, and he got reincarnated into an innocent boy. So there's a kind of a big factor in redeeming for the bad characters. This is particularly, I find that the kind of similarity in the ideas of Buddhism in it. But in real life, it just doesn't happen, because in real life, the redeeming system in Japan, judicially, is political. But yes, there's a redeeming factor, surely, for these bodies in fictions. And as they are depicted, they were also traumatized by the, I don't know, that the reality of the life, right? Like the Buddhism does preach that the whole world is full of suffering. So that creates the bad people. So that's the idea of there's no 100% bad people. So they get redeemed. So that element's strongly there right now in manga, anime, today, really. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Obata-san. There was a question from Chris. Chris, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, because I'm one of the panelists, I can't write my question in the Q&A, so I messaged Mayu to let you know I wanted to ask a question. Really interesting talk. Thank you, Obata-san. And I found the discussion about popularity of anti-heroes very interesting. And you obviously made a comparison earlier on with Western anti-heroes, but generally I would say that Western anti-heroes tend to win. And that may not always be the same in Japan. Certainly in Japanese movies, which I have studied, and I'll put a link in the chat for those who want to look at my own work on this. I find that many Japanese anti-heroes and the protagonists generally may actually lose. They could even lose their life or never get a total victory. Are manga different, or is it that Japan is different to the West in this area? And obviously one thing that's puzzling me is, as I was starting to think about this question, is actually the sporting examples you provide in real life, actually they do win. Naomi Osaka is a winner, but how about manga and anime?
Okay, I think I should point out that I focused on the boys manga quite a lot this time around. So, so anti-heroes or rebels in boys manga is slightly different from I think the what we perceive the anti-heroes in general. I didn't mention about really popular rebel anti-hero figures in manga and anime. Just in general, today I just didn't point them out. So there are anti-heroes. If you widen the scope, then you find in manga anime there are anti-heroes who win. Anti-heroes who stick to their anti-hero philosophy and do not get really compromised and eventually win. So yes, if I widen the scope, yes, you find that the very similar anti-heroes as you see in Western culture in Japan too. But if I just narrow down the scope, just look at the boys manga. That's not the case, really. And boys manga is very, very influential, most popular genre in manga and anime. Okay, so their influence is really huge, and so we shouldn't forget about that. But despite that, yes, in general, yes, the anti-heroes are still winners, even in Japan. Okay.
Okay, so there are two more questions, but it's 6 minutes past 2. So how do you think, Fumio? Shall we?
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's
Okay, so I'm sure some of you, some of the attendees had to leave. So I just put the link to the recorded session for today. So if you want to check, please check this link, and then you can look at this later, watch this video later. Okay, and then so let me move on to the question from Eileen Cho. Okay, hello Obata-san, what do you think about Saitama or anti-heroes in One Punch Man? Because the presentation in One Punch Man seems to reflect or challenge the concept of hero in current society.
Apologize, I haven't seen One Punch Man. I have to watch it, but he is really interesting. I mean, from just illustrations, I can see that you know, his facial expression and all that things, and he's canceling out all these typical stereotypes of the heroes. So he's a very new. So he's worth studying, I think, and he's still popular. So I'm sorry, I apologize. Sorry, she's saying no. Is it okay? I'm sorry.
Okay, so Obata-san hasn't seen the One Punch Man and eating. Is that okay? Sorry. Let me move on to the next question from Amanda. Okay, Amanda said, are there in manga authors that are active in politics? Is there anyone trying to bring the tolerance of manga motifs into the mainstream?
Yeah, trying to bring the tolerance of manga motifs into the mainstream. Right. You know what? Manga authors just don't have a time. They're busy, really, really busy. And the manga, it's just the surviving the manga industry in Japan is like it's toughest job, I think. So they just simply don't have time to be engaged politically. And there are a few guys who are sort of, you know, like finished their series and eventually sort of moved on to a bit of a political statement, you know, making some political statement, but it's just very, 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 very few. And they usually, I think there's a guy called the Yoshinori Kobayashi. He's the only one I can think of. He started off doing a kids comic, and then eventually moved on to the running his manga series, stating about the social problems in the adult manga series. Manga magazines for the adults. And he eventually moved on to, well, he's not a politician anyway, but he's the only one really. And trying to bring a tolerance of manga motifs into the mainstream. Trying to bring a tolerance. I don't know, sorry, I don't quite get the idea, sorry, question. Is it okay to skip that? Anyone trying to bring tolerance? Manga motifs. Sorry, I don't quite get that question. Hopefully okay. Thanks very much, yeah. It seems okay now. Sorry, you muted. Mayu.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Fumio. So thank you, Amanda. Fumio has answered that question. And let's move on to the Yu-Chen Liu's last question, okay? The anime film version of Kimetsu no Yaiba is the #1 box office in Japan history. What role of Japanese art styles like Mono no Aware plays in this event? Thank you.
Mono no Aware, God. My perception of the Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, you know, it's inherited what was going on beforehand. The series from shonen manga, Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, all these ones. That system, that things that I saw, relationships and all this, you know. I saw the same thing a lot in Kimetsu no Yaiba. So the Demon Slayer. And I'm sorry, I didn't see Demon Slayer particularly original. It does. I think it refers to the Taisho era, which is 1920s. And when I mentioned about these bad boys, bad youth, pre-war area, Bankara, they used the Japanese schoolboys outfits, sort of modified it to show their defiance and rebellious against the rule. That element is actually used in Demon Slayer. That I found really interesting because there are upsurge, or let's say interest towards the traditional Japanese sort of thing, like swords and samurai, and even like sort of that era, Meiji Taisho era. And it's not really like nostalgia, but it's more like finding these things, these culture of that time very exotic. So people adapting that, the visual references of that time, these things really caught me more than Mono no Aware. And in terms of Mono no Aware, as I understand, is little to be seen in Demon Slayer series, Kimetsu no Yaiba. It's more of it's again another version of One Piece and Naruto, in the more like how do you call that? Like most sorry, I shouldn't say trendiest. Let's say fashionable visual elements, which are quite appealing to the maybe the youth readers. Sorry, to the readership these days, such as the Taisho era culture. So Mono no Aware is something, maybe I should study about Mono no Aware a bit more about it. But yeah, Mono no Aware is something that, there's the kind of things that we see happening as well in Naruto. And of course, it doesn't have to be boys magazine. It's something to do with like fighting, and then there are bad guys and good guys and fights and all these people dying and etc. And there's a lot of emphasis and spots on their emotional, dramatic things, I guess that is something that I find that lack of inclusion in the real life. People are really fragmented, so they want to feel the sympathy towards weak people, weak existence in stories or real life as well. So that part, I think, reflected in those series since 90s, I think. So maybe that's the answer, maybe. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for all those questions. That was very amazing, and then a very kind of enthusiastic discussion was going on. That was great, I think. But unfortunately, we have to go. It's 30 minutes past 2 o'clock. I'm sorry. And then so all the question has been answered by Fumio. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this Cardiff Japanese online lecture series, past 1. And then I hope you had a great time with Fumio. And then if you've got more questions, I mean, if you have a question, please, we are going to seek the way of kind of communicating with you later on. Okay, thank you very much. And also, there are some information from Chris as well in a chat box about his disaster movies, Japanese disaster movies. Okay, so if you are interested in Chris' work, please check these links as well. And then I have put the link to the MLang, Modern Languages in Cardiff University's YouTube channel here in the chat box. So please check that to watch the recorded session for today. And thank you so much. And then also one more thing, I am so sorry. We are planning to second Cardiff Japanese online lecture series on the 24th of March this month, that's Wednesday, from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. We invited Dr. Wes Robertson at Macquarie University, Australia, and then Wes will give the talk on the sociocultural aspect of Japanese language learning. So if you're interested in, please check the event page. I'm going to put the event page link here now. So could you hold on a sec? I'm sorry. This one. Okay, so I'm going to put this link to the event page for Wes's lecture on the 24th of March. So please check this. Okay, so that's going to be the closing. Thank you very much, everyone, and then thank you so much for Fumio, for doing a great lecture. And then we are so happy to see you, and then see your work. And then I hope we all going to be okay in this weird social situation, and I hope I can see you soon in this Cardiff online lecture again. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
Sayonara. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep.